Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cricket Unfiltered. We are live on YouTube recording this episode. I'm Andrew Menzel. Friends and enemies call me Menners. I'm joined, of course, by Paul Dennett. Paul, how are you?
Good, Andrew. How are you?
Good,
I'm
thank you.
neither a friend nor an enemy.
Just a colleague. And yes, we have a returning panelist after a bit of an absence. Jelisa Apps from Network 10 joins us again. Jelisa, welcome.
Hello, I apologize to everyone. I am in my car. I am in a car park, and I can't move the steering wheel any lower.
It's really, compared to most of your tech difficulties in the past, this is minor. We can see you, we can hear you. The listeners, I'm sure, are thrilled you're back on the show. So yeah, it's fantastic. We've got there. I just thought, you will be happy with me, Jelisa. The last couple of days I was commentating on country cricket. And as you know, I'm a big supporter of country cricket and taking matches to regional venues. So yeah, it was a nice couple of days at North Sydney Oval.
That's awesome. What was it?
It was just, there's a regional Big Bash tournament.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and it's really good, beautiful. It sort of brings back that sort of reason why you play the game. There's people that love the game, and it brings communities together. And for a cynical prick like me, that's a nice couple of days.
You said that it was great to take it to regional venues. Are you so inner city that you regard North Sydney Oval as a regional venue, Menners?
I was going to say that.
I was saying in the past,
he crossed the bridge.
I've criticized. Well, that's a big thing actually. I've criticized taking Big Bash games to regional venues. Anyway, just a callback that no one heard or got. So a couple of things before we get into the headlines. Firstly, it's International Women's Day. Jelisa, is there anything you'd like to say on International Women's Day?
No, I spent it at an International Women's Day event today out at Penrith, and that was really lovely. And just like really nice community feel. It kind of reminded me back of home where it was like very small, intimate. So yeah, just happy International Women's Day to all the women that I also interact with a lot on Twitter and social media and that kind of thing. And to anyone who's saying, when's International Men's Day? It's November 19, so get organised.
There's a comedian in England, Richard Herring, who used to, every International Women's Day, he would search the Twitter, and every moron man who said, when's International Men's Day? He'd reply, November 19 or whatever it was. And he did it like for 5 years in a row, and then he just got exhausted by it. But it was quite a noble effort, I thought.
Good on him.
Yes, I mean, all I'd like to say is that, and someone that has a young daughter growing up in the world, I'm glad it's getting better for women all the time. That in all areas, the opportunities are much better than they were, when I grew up. So yeah, I'm just happy International Women's Day, and I'm glad Jelisa's here for it.
I'm also happy to, because it's still mostly men at the top, I'm happy just to be surrounded in my life by some really good men, including both of you, that, lift women up. So not that I'm going to acknowledge men on International Women's Day, but it's nice to see that's kind of changed as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dale.
If I was near you, I'd give you a bum slap.
Just any other thing I wanted to touch on, since we recorded the last episode, it's been the 1 year anniversary of Shane Warne and Rod Marsh's passing. And it was quite a significant day. There was a lot of tributes paid to both of them, especially Shane Warne. And yeah, I miss him. I missed him all summer. It was strange not having him around, and just send my thoughts to the family and, good friends of Shane that have, it's probably been a really tough year for them adjusting to life without him. So it's hard enough for us fans, and I just have a lot of empathy for his friends and family.
It blew my mind that it had been a year. I was so shocked that when that came around that it had actually been a year. And I have found myself this summer watching way less Fox, not because I think that their quality has diminished. Obviously he's missing from there, but I just I still think they have a really quality team, but I just found it really sad to watch without him. So I found myself actually watching a lot of Seven.
Yeah, I'll never forget. I think it was it the first day of the test series against Pakistan in the first test. And, just after play finished, the news started to come through about his passing. And yeah, still a shock a year later.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
All right. So let's get into the headlines brought to you by Piccolo Podcasts. Now, look, I got a bit annoyed during the week, and this is to do with some comments out of the Australian camp after their fantastic third test victory. Well, the first thing that annoyed me was Andrew McDonald saying the win in the third test was a validation of their methods. And in Delhi, they just had one bad hour. I think when you're 2-0 down in the series, I don't think you can say the next victory is a validation of your methods. What do you think, Jelisa?
It's a validation of your methods in that test, and that's pretty much as far as it goes for me. I know you're not the biggest supporter of Andrew McDonald. So
No, love Macca. Love Macca.
JL
was better. JL was better for this team.
I'm taking this all with a grain of salt. But yeah, I think you can't really say that it's validation of your methods when it was pretty disastrous in those first two. It's probably just a validation of your methods in that particular game.
It's a pity that there's no ability to do sort of like A/B split testing. And I mean, not Alan Border split testing, like in this statistics where you do A down one side and B down the other. Because we'll never know, but it's quite possible that the Australians have outperformed, that India has just such a phenomenal record at home. Prior to this match, they'd lost 3 tests in a decade, that maybe it is a validation of their methods, and maybe they had no entitlement to perform this well. But I did a few numbers during the week looking at the last, since 2004, when Australia last won, and looking at each tour that Australia had gone on to India, and taking the average runs per wicket for the Australians, taking the average runs per wicket for the Indians, and comparing them. And so far this series, we're 33% below India. 2017, we're only 6% below, which reflects how close that series was and that Australia really probably just about should have won it. The disastrous one was 2013. We lost it 4-0, and India had a 69% better than us. 2010, they were 25% better. 2008, 40% better. And 2004, Australia was 28% better. So I suppose ultimately, and it's sort of stating the obvious, it is going to come down to this last test match. If Australia happen to win this, and that makes it 2-2, and if I looked at those same numbers and it's down to almost parity, then I think you would say definitely that their methods have been validated. My fear is that, I think I used the tennis analogy last time, that it's like we've got to set off Djokovic, and we're going to come out and get bageled in the last set, and they'll blow us away. And I think then, if it came back at 50 or 60% down, then you'd sort of say, it's a pretty underwhelming tour.
I just think it went so badly for the Australians in the first 2 tests that, they kind of it was a fresh start in that third test. They had a break. They had nothing to lose. The trophy was gone, and they played really well. And I'm not trying to denigrate that performance in the third test, but in Delhi, they threw a test away when they had it in the bag, and they went there with a real aim to win this series. So you can't say, validates our methods when you panicked and lost, got bowled out in a session the match before. Another thing that annoyed me about McDonald, and I don't want to criticize the journalists that are there, but McDonald's comes out after the test and goes, I just want to praise Alex Carey for that stumping of Rohit Sharma on the first morning. If he misses that, then we could be in real trouble, which is like stupid thing to say, like, if he misses that, like, of course, you could say that about any dismissal. And it was kind of a regulation stumping. Kuhnemann around the wicket to a right-hander. Carey was sighted the whole way. It was never in front of Sharma's body. If an international keeper misses that, he should be disappointed. So for McDonald to just go, it's such a great stumping, I just think I don't need that spin in my life. There's enough spin on the field.
But is it not okay to come out and just praise? I mean, of course, you're going to expect that a good wicketkeeper will do that, but is it not okay to come out and heap praise when it's worthy?
Well, you can say Carey had a good game, but I just think to bring out that stumping, some miraculous bit of wicket keeping, and the fact that if Sharma was missed, then he could have gone on and scored 150. I just think it's just silly to me. Like, I get you're going to try to pump the tires.
I think it actually highlights to your own team though, like that was that moment where everything could have changed. Like, you're kind of reinforcing to your team that those little, that little bit of effort it does have such an impact.
I think it was a slightly better stumping than you're giving it credit for, Menez.
Yeah.
Live for a split second, I actually thought he dropped it, and I remember thinking, that'd be right. It bounced a little bit. I thought it was a pretty decent stunt. Yeah, I think an international keeper should have done it, but I think it was okay for him to praise it. I think that maybe you're reading more into it than the other 8 billion citizens of the planet.
I just think, anyway, yeah. So, we're looking ahead now to the 4th test in Ahmedabad, and it starts tomorrow as we record this. And because the test is sort of ending usually in 2 or 3 days, by the time you're listening to this, it could be over. So I don't want to spend too long getting into the nitty-gritty of the 4th test, but there are a few interesting talking points. On the first day, the Indian Prime Minister and the Australian Prime Minister will be there, and they're expecting a crowd of around 110,000, which is just incredible.
Yes, I've got a few thoughts on this. Now, number one, I'm not overly thrilled about the fact that there's a sort of a political aspect to it, although I should say I think it's great for Australia and India to have closer political ties. I think that makes sense for both countries, and so on that side of things, it's okay. It'll be a little bit disappointing though if the crowd is a world record, but by tea most of them are gone, and on day 2, if it's a tiny crowd, and you kind of get the sense that it's a manufactured crowd in the sense that they were all there more because of they were kind of there to support Modi rather than anything else. But look, we complain about test match crowds, so I'm not going to be complaining too much. It'll be interesting to see if it beats the world record. I was at the world record in the Boxing Day 2013, the Ashes. About 93,000. A lot of Indians will claim that the India-Pakistan match, I think of the 1990s at Eden Gardens, had more, but there's no actual receipts for that, and I think people tend to overestimate the size of crowds, but those days were listed at 100,000. So, look, in some ways, if they got 110,000 and broke the world record, I'd be absolutely delighted. But I just slightly, it doesn't sit all that well with me that it's become a bit of a political event.
I just don't care about crowd world records. It doesn't enhance whether I enjoy it. It doesn't enhance whether I value that test match more. I just don't care. Like, okay, great. Probably the only record I cared about was when they, the women's event.
2020, yeah.
Yeah, 2020, when the Women's World Cup, that was a record. That was just cool.
It wasn't, though. It came second.
Oh, okay. Well, then it came second. But that was probably the only time when I actually cared about crowd numbers, because more of the story behind it, as in how far the game had come. When it's like when people talk about record-breaking rugby league crowd, I just don't care. It doesn't enhance my enjoyment.
It enhances my enjoyment massively. Like, it's one of my favorite things in the world is crowd numbers, even without the context behind them. That's why.
But you're a numbers guy. Batting averages, temperature. I mean, anything to do with numbers.
That's why I paid
being
$50
in a media box in Australia there when you get given, oh guys, this is the crowd number, and you're looking around going,
no, it's not.
I don't think so.
Well, that's a separate point.
The whole Big Bash season.
No, but I think that, there was that time we've talked about before where the Roosters published a crowd that the Telegraph was so emphatic was wrong. They then published a conglomeration of photos, and actually you could count them on there, and it was proven as wrong. I think since then, at least at cricket crowds, I think in Australia that they're fairly honest. But yeah,
absolutely not.
But I don't see how the mechanism is of cheating. I think that that it comes straight through from the turnstiles. It might be slightly dishonest in that in Adelaide half the time they're at the back, but I think that number of people did walk through. I think to say that they've got someone whose job it is to inflate it, I think it would get out with the.
I don't think that they're deliberately lying. I think sometimes I wonder if sometimes those figures are based on like corporate boxes and things like that, where those numbers are counted and those people actually often don't turn up.
Yeah,
definitely.
I don't think so. I think that like when I say I don't think so, I'm saying it's Menners when he said definitely, just dismissed it. Jelisa
That's
was at
true.
least saying as a possibility. Menners goes definitely, definitely. Cricket Australia is defrauding us with the numbers of the crowds.
No, I
I
don't
think
do
that's
that.
a
I
strong
think it's what
statement.
Jelisa. It's technically on tickets sold, but maybe not people there.
No, I think it's people there. I think that when they walk through, that's when it gets it, because, and the corporate boxes they're not that sizable anyway. The percentage is still much more in the actual crowd. Anyway, I think we're slightly digressing. But
I love it how Julie said she doesn't care about crowd numbers. We've just argued about it for 5 minutes.
It just doesn't affect whether I couldn't care if they get a record.
I think you do care. I think you really do care. Before we move on, I believe you. I just want to look back on the third test. So we actually didn't discuss the pitting. The pitch was rated as poor. So the indoor pitch was given a very poor rating, demerit points. If they get another one, they could lose international status. And since then, the groundsmen have come out, and the Indoor Cricket Association has said that basically they weren't in charge of the pitch, the BCCI were. And now we're seeing at Ahmedabad this strange situation that they've prepared 3 pitches, and the Indian team is going to pick the one they want the most. And I was hearing today that one is so far to one side of the square that there's going to be an extremely long boundary on one side if they pick it, and that the sight screens aren't even that far across. So they'll have to sort of erect sight screens. So I don't like this. I think India are taking it too far. I think this is bad for the game to play this sort of stuff where you have multiple pitches, and it's a bad look.
I have read on Twitter today that they actually have confirmed that is going to be the pitch, that far right one, which will look ridiculous. And it's not a great look as well that the ones towards the centre are being reserved for the IPL. But yeah, I mean, we've said it many times that I think that the pitch should be produced by an independent ground staff, and that the home board shouldn't have any say in it. And Australia does that. No other country seems to do it. And other countries, it annoys me, assume that we doctor the wickets. We don't. We do lots of things wrong as far as cricket is concerned in this country. But the one thing that we don't do is doctor the pitches to suit the home team. Other countries should follow our example. And the pitch in indoor was poor. It was very entertaining cricket. I know Mena said that the batters, we didn't get the entertainment of seeing batters at their full flight. I agree with that, but it still was hard to take your eyes off it. But the way that they went about producing it is not the way it should be. And I think that India cricket don't need to do that. They're so good at home. They would gain more credibility by just saying, we're going to leave it up to the ground staff to produce what they think is the best wicket for the local prevailing conditions. And India will still get a massive home ground advantage because they're all so good in those conditions.
Menners, I just want to clarify something that you were saying. Perhaps it was the way that you said it, or perhaps there's a misunderstanding, but we do prepare multiple pitches. It's just that the ground staff get to a point of, okay, this is the one that's going to come up the best.
Yeah, and it's not usually, though, like a couple of days out. They prepare a couple of wickets in the weeks leading up and, see which ones where the grass sort of grows a bit better, and they pick one. You wouldn't see the Sydney Test, a couple of days out.
I think the Sydney Test, they picked it maybe, I think it was a week or 2 out.
Yeah, exactly. Ahmedabad are going to pick it probably. Well, if Paul's right and they picked it today, that's the day before the test. So
but I still think it's the mindset behind it that if they're doing that in Australia, it's to produce the best pitch for the cricket, whereas they're doing it in other countries to allow the home side to pick the one that they want the most.
Now, Jelisa, where do you see the Smith captaincy, the caretaker captaincy role? There's been some debate that, he's done a great job. Maybe he's more suited to the role now than he was last time. What do you think?
I've been pretty shocked, actually, by how quickly people have said, oh, well, we went better in that test and now he should be the captain. Like that. To me, there's so much more behind captaincy that I actually just don't think he's any less useful with a C next to his name than when he hasn't got the C next to his name. Like, I think Pat Cummins has the maturity and also the desire to be using the people around him as much as he can. And Smith's biggest strength as a captain was on the field. He wasn't necessarily particularly strong media performer or with the things that captaincy brings off the field, which I think Pat Cummins is quite good at. So I don't really see a need to change, nor that I think anyone in Cricket Australia, Steve Smith, Pat Cummins, or anyone would be thinking there would be possibly a change.
I'm happy with both. Either one could do the job. I don't think it makes a big difference. I mean, we've seen on the subcontinent, Smith's a much better captain, and it's actually much better in these conditions where your fast bowler isn't the captain. Because I think if Pat Cummins wasn't there for these last two tests, there would be a point where they would have to think about not picking him. Stark's a better bowler in these conditions, and you need the three spinners. So, but I kind of agree with you. You know, they both bring different things to the role, and I think a lot of hardliners tend to think Smith had his chance. But I'm happy with either one.
I just don't think there's any proven that Smith's a better tactician in Indian conditions. The fact that you just boldly state it. Yeah, we won that game, but we would have won it whether Smith was captain, whether Cummins was captain, or whether you were captain, Menners.
Okay, I'm not going to have the same argument last week. We definitely.
So why did you say it as though it was a fact?
Because it is a fact.
You said that to goad me. You said it purely to say that, so then you could now stake the moral high ground and say we don't want to have this argument.
Well, I mean, we've argued about this last week. I think the listeners know who's right. But yes, I would like to be captain. So I agree with that. I would do a great job, and not with the bat or the ball. And I would drop every.
You'd really get the same loyalty there.
I would drop.
I reckon you'd really you'd take on a lot of opinions.
Yes. All right. So, just want to move on from the fourth test. Hopefully, Australia can win it 2-all, and level the series 2-all, win the fourth test. And if they do, I'll kind of have that sort of, what could have been feeling that. Had we not stuffed it up in Delhi, we could be here with a 3-1 series win, talking about how fantastic a tour it was. And instead, there was one session where the coach just sat on their hands and let the team sweep themselves to 2-0 down.
Yeah, I don't think that's. I think
that's my opinion. That's not a fact. That's my opinion.
Okay, calm down. What I was going to say is I think that on these pitches, India is better than Australia. I think if Australia end up drawing it 2-all, that will probably flatter us a little bit. If we're going to play 15 test matches, I think ultimately India would win about 10-5 or something maybe. I know I predicted 2-all at the start of the series, but I've come to the conclusion that on these pitches, they are just a bit better than us. More than just a bit.
I almost don't want us to win because I don't want that feeling of what could have been. Yeah, because I think it's you can't
want the misery. Yeah,
I just want to know that they were better. I don't want to sit there and feel like we blew it, even though we did blow it in that test. I don't want to be sitting there feeling like we let it go. I want to be feeling like they were better than us.
Well, we did let it go.
I think that they're both true. That we performed badly in that session, but I think they are better than us. And I think if we get 2-all, it'll be as a pure fan, it'll be one of the most satisfying sort of feelings that I'll have had in a long time, given that we were down 2-0. And I think our credibility has been on the line. That there's a sort of feeling of, this rivalry, it's starting to very quickly edge in one direction. That India's won the last 2 series in Australia. They've won the last several series in India. If we'd gone here and got belted 4-0, then it would have a feeling of them jumping further ahead. If Australia can actually level it, I think it'll be a very, very significant achievement. It'll still, I agree with you. You'll still think about what might have been, but I think we'd be lucky to get 2-all.
I must admit, I got a very good message from Abhishek, who's a fan that listens to the show and lives in the Boston area in the States. And he made a good point that Indian batting doesn't seem as good as it was a few years ago. And he actually blames the IPL, said a lot of these batters don't have good defense. They go out there and it's hit or bust. And I have to say, the Indian batting, the top order batting, has not been as good as I thought. Apart from Sharma and the lower order, it's been pretty average.
I think that's the pitches, though.
Sorry, go on, Paul.
I was going to say, I think the pitches are so spin friendly that those numbers that I got last time, I've got India averaging 23.9 runs per wicket. That is the lowest that they have they've done since the 2004 series when we won, when they were averaging 22.5. But this is by far Australia's lowest. Australia's averaging 18.0 runs per wicket, which is the lowest that we've ever had. And you add it up, this series has had fewer runs per wicket than any series since 2004. I actually think the IPL's possibly improved the Indian batting because they are realizing that it's better to be aggressive, that they're more likely to play shots, and I think that's a better way of batting. So I think it's just that the pitches have just been absolutely diabolically difficult, and I think the Australian bowlers, have bowled pretty well.
I think Virat Kohli has probably not performed over the last really 18 months as he should, and it's kind of been buried a little bit by the fact that they have. Sorry, that was not me.
Right.
Whatever's crashing in the background. The fact that they have been performing and particularly against Australia and winning how they have been, I think maybe if they hadn't, Virat Kohli would have come under the spotlight and maybe has flown under the radar a little bit that he's dropped off.
Ooh, dropping Collie. Big call from Jelisa.
No, not dropping him.
Jesus, man, you're dangerous. She never said that.
She alluded to it.
No, she
alluded to his spot being in question.
She used the word that his form is dropping off, and because you weren't even listening, you heard her say dropping, and now you're going to drop him.
That's the next step, isn't it?
Collie. I said his form has dropped off a little bit, as has Steve Smith's. I think it's been a similar kind of trajectory, but I think that it's maybe been hidden a little bit by their performances. I never said drop Collie.
Smith's bounced back though. Smith's form's now really good as well. I don't think it's in maybe in Australia we don't notice much. I think it's a pretty high talking point in India is Virat Kohli's form though.
Right.
It was Diwali in India yesterday, and I saw Collie running around with all sorts of colours on him, having a great time.
Wasn't it Holly?
Oh, that's it, Holly.
Yeah,
I think it was. But I like this new Collie, this sort of light-hearted Collie that doesn't score any runs against us. All right.
Hey, one last thing.
Yes.
And I said to it before how I'm not all that comfortable about being a political event. I'm still a sucker for. I just love the poster that they've got outside the stadium. I just, maybe it's naive, but I just think it's really cool. They've got Australia and India, 75 years of friendship through cricket. Then they've got the obligatory photos of Albanese and Modi, but they've also got all the cricketers from past and present. Don Bradman's on there, Alan Border, Sonny Gavaskar. And it's just a really nice little thing. Cute. I think it's really cool. I think it's great.
That's cute.
Next time we can load them up into StreamYard and put them up there for the viewers, Paul, now that we've got this full multimedia show happening. All right, now let's move on from the tour in India because, spent a lot of time talking about it. We haven't spent enough time because we haven't recorded the full episode since Australia won the T20 World Cup to win their 6th T20 title out of the last 7. A fantastic performance by the Australian women's team. There we go. So if you're looking on YouTube, you can see the poster. Yes. Albo looking great. Now, so the Australian women's team, they've won the 50 over World Cup. They've won the last 3 T20 World Cups. They hold the Ashes. They hold the Commonwealth Games gold medal. They've beaten India in the last bilateral series. I mean, there's just nothing they haven't won. But I have to say, the 2 semi-finals leading into the final, Australia v India and England v South Africa, were just such great games of cricket and, 2 thrillers. So another fantastic tournament, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that Australia was probably one of their not poor performances, but it was a little bit of a mediocre performance. If this Australian team ever puts a mediocre performance in the final, yet they never looked. There was never one ball that I thought South Africa was going to win. I think that's a sign of their greatness. They had a sort of an okay day, but not a great day, and they still comprehensively won the final. But the semi is very interesting, and I think it's a sign of what Indian cricket is going to be. That in many ways, Australia was outplayed by India in the semi-final, but Australia won because of our superior athleticism and fitness. And I think to a degree that reflects the longer period that Australian women's cricketers have been able to train and play as full-time professionals. There was that piece of fielding that Elise Perry did on the boundary that rightly received lots of praise. I reckon most of the Australians probably would have been able to do that. I'm not sure whether many of the Indians would have been able to, but I bet you in 5 years or 10 years, the entire Indian team would be able to. So I think it's another warning for Australia that it's time to take it to the next level if it's going to be possible, because with the WPL kicking off and with the flood of money that's going to be going into Indian cricket, we are going to find it very, very difficult to continue to compete with them. It's going to be really fascinating and exciting to watch. Even Harmanpreet Kaur, who played a wonderful innings in the semi, and I know she was sick going into it, so maybe her she was not 100%, but she was kind of jogging to get into her crease and was unlucky in the fact that the bat plugged in the ground. But I think that if she was on not out, she probably would have made her ground because she would have been just running a little bit more quickly. I think in 5 years' time, that same equivalent batter from India will be fitter and stronger because they'll have all this professionalism behind them. So it's going to be very interesting to see what takes place.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Paul. And also just the women's IPL is just going to change the landscape massively for the next World Cup. And I think it would be it will be one of the more interesting things to see how far everyone's got to Australia, because there's no doubt Australia are just so far ahead at the moment. And I've said it time and time again, I particularly criticise Cricket Australia on a lot of decisions, but what they did for women's cricket did not just change women's cricket in Australia, it changed the world. And I think it's just fantastic to see where it's going now.
I love Jemima Rodriguez from India. She's such a fantastic batter to watch. She brought India back in the game with that little cameo she played. She played well in the WBBL, I think, 2 years ago. I'd love to see her back here next season. The other thing that kind of bums me out is South Africa made a World Cup final. And, that is the first time it's ever happened. Until then, South Africa had this hoodoo of losing World Cup semi-finals. And I'm glad the women were able to break the hoodoo and not the men, because I like the women's team a lot more than the men's team. But Paul, I mean, we've grown up our whole lives with South Africa bowing out of all these tournaments in the semi-final, and it's done. They've been to a World Cup final.
No, it's not. It's all about winning. The hoodoo continues. They have still failed to win one. That's the way to think of it. We're too greedy.
I like it.
Never make a final. I thought it was a little bit strange that the pitch in the final was a used pitch, and it robbed the final of just 5% of the spectacle that it otherwise might have been. South Africans played okay in the final. They were, as I said, they never looked like winning, but there was a period there where Chloe Tryon looked like she was about to explode, and had she hit a few more boundaries, it might have got interesting. But the Australians far too classy in the end. And what is that now? Is it 21 World Cups between the men and the women?
21 World Cups and Champions trophies combined. So I think we won one Champions trophy, and that's just incredible.
For the men, we won two. We won two.
So there you go. 21 World Cup and Champions trophies combined for Australian cricket. That is some record. But I think the South African women's team did fantastic, though. They had that controversy losing Dane van Niekerk being ruled out. They lost their opening game, and they could have just, been bundled out under the pressure, but they actually, fought all the way, knocked out England in the semi-final in a thriller. And, congratulations to them. That was a really fine effort. But I agree with you. The used pitch was so silly, and they were playing all the games in the afternoon in South Africa, and I just don't know why they wouldn't play them in prime time there to get bigger crowds.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with the crowd numbers. I thought they were just really low. Obviously not for the final, but for the general pool rounds, it was pretty disappointing.
All right, now
one last thing on that. I was just going to say, in my own defense, having said that Nathan Lyon should be dropped, and Jelisa, I don't know if you heard the last podcast, but I think
I've been listening.
The biggest mea culpa or mea culpa, however you say that, ever. You did, Lord. Is it mea culpa or mea culpa?
What? Sorry.
Yeah, is it mea culpa or mea culpa? Do you pronounce?
I've always said mea.
Okay. I've never actually said the word. I've never had to back down before.
Well, you have, but you haven't said it. No, you haven't admitted it.
But I was just going to say, I did say that I thought it was that Talia McGrath was batting too low, and I know he won. But I think that when you've got her as the number one T20 batter in the world, she's on 801 points. Beth Mooney 770 is second. Meg Lannings's fourth on 696. So McGrath's a long way in front, and for her to have only faced one ball across the semi and the final, when throughout the tournament she scored 66 from 41, a strike rate of 161. And Mooney, Lanning, and Healy, who had strike rates in the 100 and teens, got to face, or probably on average, 2 or 3 times as many balls as Talia McGrath. Australia probably should have lost that semi-final. And I think that, if we look back on that, one of the things that would have been said is it's a bit silly to have your best batter not facing a ball.
Yeah, I don't know about the batting order. I just think Australia were a bit conservative in that semi-final. They seemed to be a bit gun shy. I mean, they had wickets in hand. I think they should have been more aggressive, and maybe Talia would have got more of an opportunity. But I mean, and this is a good segue, pro segue, as we move into the Women's Premier League that has kicked off. McGrath overnight made 90 off, next to nothing. I think 40 odd balls, and almost got her side home. So you are right, Paul. She is becoming a force, and she can't be hiding down the order for much longer.
No, exactly.
So the WPL has begun, the Women's Premier League, and because I'm a great co-host, we'll start with the subject that Paul is most passionate about, which is DRS. And for the first time, players will be allowed to review wide and no ball decisions using DRS. Now, Simon Taufel, the former elite umpire, has said that he's not thrilled with this decision, and he's really conscious around trying to turn the art of officiating into a science and seek perfection, which I just think is kind of laughable when you're talking about things that actually are a science. Like, you can see if a ball's above a waist. There's no opinion there. You can see if someone's overstepped. You can, there's no need for an umpire's judgment on that.
I agree. I like Simon Taufel. I do think that his insights on Channel 7 add to the coverage. I really like him. But his statement sort of saying that he doesn't like this, and I'll read it out again. I'm really conscious around trying to turn the art of officiating into a science and seek perfection, whatever that looks like with decision-making, saying that's the wrong thing to do. That should be on the umpires' hats, that they should be trying to turn it into a science. Of course, you try to get everything right. It's not an art. It should be a science. And I think certainly with waist-high full tosses, technology is the right thing to do, because it's been a strange thing missing, that when it's absolutely crucial, when you can check all these other things, something like that, they haven't been able to go upstairs and check. So I think that's an improvement. Wides, I could take or leave, but I think that the idea would be, I suppose, that if we saw it in the England-New Zealand men's test match, that it probably should have been a tie, and England probably were robbed of the fact that the wide wasn't called towards the end. So I suppose when it really comes down to it, if it really matters, I feel for the officials if they make the decision on field and they don't have the option for the players to check it, and they've then decided the WPL or the IPL. I don't think it's a bad thing that the players do have that option. I can't see them using it for wides too often, except in critical situations like that, which I think is probably the right thing.
I mean, I'm of the view of that if you're going to use it and you can check it. I just don't like technology. I am a dinosaur.
She's a country girl.
I don't like technology in any sport. I question a lot of it, to be honest. So I just don't like it.
Jeez,
hey, can we have a deal?
I reckon Paul's going to come to your house now. And
Paul's going to explode.
Can we have a deal?
I may as well have just sat here and said climate change isn't real.
Yes. Our text exchange for the next 4 hours is just going to be wild.
Deal. The day that I'm sure it's coming, when they once again, as they should be able to do, check forward passes in the NRL with the technology. When that happens, we've got to go out and have a beer together and celebrate. You can cry, Jelisa, and I will celebrate, because I think that's that's something that, this is good to annoy men as well, talking about rugby league, but that's something that's crazy that they can't check, because the whole thing of, you can't tell whether it's floated forward and it's got to be backwards out of the hands. Nothing's better than the camera for determining that. So I think one day that'll come back in as well, and that'll be awesome. Bring it all in, all technology.
Of course they can check. They just wouldn't want the controversy surrounding it, which I don't blame anybody for.
All right, now Paul, put you on the spot here. Leg by decisions are not going to be reviewed. So you can't review them. So you're a batter, say last ball of a T20 innings, you're on 97, clips a bit of your bat and pad, goes down to the fine leg boundary, and 4 runs. You should be 101 not out, but the umpire goes leg buys. Should that be able to be reviewed? I mean,
I think what they should do with that is they should actually sort of give a free review and say that afterwards, if it's still 4 either way, they should look at that and in that instance actually give it to the batter if that's the case. I don't really care. What is concerning is that one where You have the situation of let's say you need 1 run to win, last ball, and hit on the pad, scamper through for a leg by, but the umpire erroneously gives you out LBW. On review, it's shown as missing, but you can't get the leg by because once they gave you out, that was a dead ball, and there's no recourse then, so you still lose. That's something I think they should fix.
Yeah, I agree. All right, on the field for the Women's Premier League, and it moves really fast, so I don't really want to get into the minutiae of the tournament, but there's been some magnificent highlights so far. And one that stood out to me was Grace Harris, who plays for the Brisbane Heat, and England international Sophie Eccleston, putting on 70 off just 26 balls to help the UP Warriors to win their opener against the Gujarat Giants. They needed 19 off the last over, and it was Annabelle Sutherland, the Australian bowler, bowling to her Australian teammate Grace Harris, and they got there with 1 ball to spare. Harris finished 59 not out of 26 balls. And, you talk about Talia McGrath going up the order, Paul. Harris put her up the order too. She could be opening in T20 cricket. She's got such a powerful game. She hits well straight. And that 70 off 26 balls was one of the most exhilarating partnerships I've seen in T20 cricket.
They were pushing her up the order in the World Cup ahead of Talia McGrath. That was what was frustrating. Yeah. I love Healy, so maybe Healy should bat at 3 and those two should open.
I guess the only issue, though, is Australian opener Beth Mooney has injured her knee, and scans have come back. I think she's ruled out of the tournament.
Yeah.
So I guess the real concern for Australia is will she be okay again for the Ashes? Knee injuries can take a while to heal. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But, from what I've seen of the WPL, there's been some great cricket. It's a little bit like the WBBL when it started. The gap between the best players and the worst players in the team is bigger than it will be in a couple of seasons.
I've been really impressed. I haven't had a chance to watch all of it. I watched the highlights of the first game. The crowd was really good. I didn't see a crowd figure, but it looked very healthy. And I thought the standard was really good. Watching the highlights, I thought this was. I think it started a lot better than the WBBL started, which makes sense given that several years have passed by. So I completely agree with what Jelisa said earlier on in the show, and I think it's just going to go gangbusters.
All right, now moving on to domestic cricket, and we really have neglected the domestic cricket scene. I know a lot of listeners in India want to know how the Marsh Cup and the Marsh Sheffield Shield are going, so you're going to get it right now. The Marsh Cup final is being played as we speak. WA are hosting South Australia, and they put on, what did they end up getting close to 400? I'll get the score for you. They're 7 for 387. So Western Australia have the chance to go back-to-back in all 3 tournaments. They won everything last year, the BBL, the WBBL as well last year, the Marsh Cup and the Marsh Shield, and they could win the Cup today. They're leading the Shield, and they've won the BBL. That's just an incredible testament to Western Australian cricket and what Christine Matthews has set up over there. Well coached by Adam Voges, who the foundation was laid by Justin Langer, and this just a great day.
Still on that Langer paycheck.
Now, Paul, you put some information here on Daniel Hughes, the New South Wales opener, and we were lucky enough to commentate on one of his hundreds earlier in the year in the Marsh Cup. And it's actually good you brought this up because I want to get him on the podcast soon and have a chat with him. But yeah, what are your thoughts around his, performances in domestic 50 over level?
It's just been funny over the years. Whenever I've done a Shield game with him and I've just sort of refreshed myself on his record, I can't get over the disparity between his first class record and his list A record. That his list A record's unbelievable, and it just seems to be getting better and better. So he's got 400s out of 7 innings this year, and he's now averaging 59.6 in domestic one-day cricket at a strike rate of 88. I think if the World Cup wasn't in India later this year, if it was in Australia, I think he'd be mentioned in dispatches as someone who's likely to be in the squad. I can't see them picking him for an Indian one, but he must be close to getting in the Australian side at some stage down the track.
He's just done a calf injury.
And he's not getting, I know we all of on this show have been championing that you can't really look at age, but he isn't getting any younger. I think he's 33 maybe now.
He's a country boy. You need to be going into bat for this.
I know,
the boy from Cowra.
he's from near where I'm from. Yeah,
I know.
I know Daniel, but yeah, I was surprised about his form. Like his form is great at the moment, but I was surprised about his form in the Big Bash. Like at the last few years, it's dropped off a bit, and it was only probably, I think it was 3 years ago, he was doing really well, and that kind of has dropped off. But certainly domestic scene, he's doing well.
I mean,
And
there
he's
is a
from New
spot.
South Wales. I mean,
Yeah.
that's ultimately, you really want most of the Australian side to be from New South Wales. I know Western Australia's doing well.
Not
at the
right
moment.
now. Look at the Shield ladder. We're
I
none
just
from
think
nine.
whenever Western Australia's doing well and New South Wales is not, that's not a great sign for Australian cricket. So I think
Ooh,
something needs to
Dennis
happen
Lilly, Rod Marsh.
for the main. Yeah, I know. It falls away pretty quickly after that. It falls away
That's
pretty
right.
darn
Jeff
quickly.
Marsh, Mitch Marsh, Sean Marsh,
There's Damien
Adam
Martin.
Gilchrist. Oh, he's
No,
from
he's from New South Wales.
I know.
Actually, we'll probably give them Stuart McGill because I think he was born over there. There's Damien
was.
Martin and there's Justin Langer and Bruce Reid.
That's it. Joe Angel.
Terry Alderman.
Everyone's turned off by this point.
Not Joe Angel. Joe Angel's good.
All
but
the
he's
Western Australians have.
not- yeah.
So, look, there is a spot at the top of the order open. You know, Finch is retired. Who's going to partner Warne at the World Cup? On those Indian pitches, I think Hughes could do really well. It suits his game. He scored a lot of runs on sort of slow, low wickets at North Sydney Oval and the Sydney Cricket Ground. So get him in there. Moving on to the Shield ladder. Well, as I said, Western Australia are on top with 50 points. Queensland and Victoria are fighting out to see who will play them in the final. Victoria have won 4 in a row after the Big Bash, so they're coming home with a wet sail. New South Wales, after Paul's comment just then, 9 matches, 5 losses, 4 draws. They've lost most of their games in 3 days. I guess from the bigger picture, Mitch Marsh made a century in his return to the 50. I think the Shield, he made 108 not out versus Tasmania in the Shield. So that augurs well for the one-day tour. And Paul, Ollie Davies finally gets his first-class debut.
Yep, I saw that. He cracked a pretty quick 28 in the first innings, which was okay. Little bugbear. I'm not criticizing you, Bennett. I'm saying this in advance. Where did you get that Shield? What site did you get that Shield ladder from?
Cricinfo.
Yeah, because it annoys me that they don't do it to the 2 decimal places. Like Tasmania, they just got it 25. It should be 25.00 to emphasize how stupid the insistence of these bonus points. New South Wales is on 13.42. I know it's not a big thing, but can we get rid of the bonus? Even I don't want Shield ladder scores to have to be to 2 decimal places. Just get rid of the bonus points. They're crazy.
Agree.
You ready to march with me? Are you going to march with me, you guys? At least you're ready to march.
It also means like you can't say like it's mathematically possible for South Australia.
Technology, no math.
And just in some other news, so you might all have seen Spencer Johnson playing for Brisbane Heat in the Big Bash during the summer. Left arm quick bowler, did really well. Well, he's made his Shield debut for South Australia. And because he's from South Australia, and in his 2 matches, he's taken 15 wickets at an average of 13. On debut, he took 6 for 87, and then in the next match, 7 for 47. And I had a look at him. You know, when Stark retires, we have got Mitchell Stark, you know, model 2, well, model 3, because Johnson was first, then Stark. So, you know, Mark 3. We've got Mitchell Johnson Mark 3 ready in the wings.
Well, I mean, he might be the best. He's probably already the best South Australian-born bowler since George Giffen 100 years ago, because Jason Gillespie was born in Sydney. Clary Grimmett was born in New Zealand. Speaking of insulted Western Australia, now insult South Australia. He's probably the best South Australian-born bowler in the last 100 years.
Normally it's me pissing everybody off. It's a nice change.
I know. It's the heat's gotten to Paul.
Something's got to him. Well, that is the domestic scene.
But seriously, Menace, what's New South Wales going to do? I mean, that's ridiculous.
That's a good question.
You know, you're the sort of most knowledgeable when it comes to state cricket. Is it time for a clean out of some of the old faces that are seemingly in there every year?
Yes, and I've spent a lot of the last couple of days, working for Cricket New South Wales, commentating and talking about this, and I think they've just got some things wrong. That's just a plain fact. Now, so I'd like to use Daniel Solway as an example. Now, he's a limited batter who may not ever have international potential. I don't know. But he was averaging just a tick under 40 in his Shield matches. They've dropped him. They haven't picked him, and they've been picking players averaging the mid to late 20s because they think they look better. And I just think that is where you're getting it wrong. You've got to reward players for good performances. New South Wales would be desperate for someone to average 40 and anchor some of these innings. So I think that's one thing. And I think Moses Enriquez, Curtis Patterson, and Daniel Hughes have had very poor seasons with the bat. Enriquez has had some good innings in there, but it's been inconsistent. And I just wonder if in the off season they're going to clear out all the contracts. I mean, what I'm hearing is that there's actually some second 11 cricket going on at the moment. And a lot of those contract decisions are going to come down to performances in the second 11 games this season and start to reward performances. But yeah, if someone averages 40 and you turf them and you pick players because you think they've got more potential, I just think you get yourself in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. I think Enriquez, you can probably give an excuse to because he's been very good except for this year. So I'd still want them to persist with him. But there do seem to be a few others that year in year out seem to be in there that don't do a whole lot. But maybe there's not. I don't know. Maybe there's not the grade talent pushing through.
I mean, I commentate on grade cricket, and I think there is the talent there. I mean, the thing is, if you look at the teams around Australia, there's a lot of New South Wales born players that weren't picked up by the system. And I like to look at someone like Ben Menenti, who's done really well since moving from Sydney to South Australia via Tasmania. He is a good competitive cricketer. He's not your flashy style cricketer when he digs in. He scored 88 and top scored last Shield match for South Australia when they're in trouble. And somehow he just wasn't brought into the New South Wales system, and he's now prospering in South Australia. So they've clearly got some of those decisions wrong. Henry Hunt's another. Anyway, so yeah, certainly something needs to be done. All right, now let's move on. There's some questions in the chat, but I want to do Can't Let It Go first. And then if Jelisa wants to duck out, she can. So Can't Let It Go, that little bit of cricket news you just can't let go of. I'll start. No, you start, Paul.
I was just going to say, and that this Australia-India Test series has been fantastically entertaining, and I think again it shows what a missed opportunity it hasn't been on free-to-air television in Australia. In a few weeks' time, the Ashes will be on Gem, which is Channel 9's secondary network. As a result, the audience figures will be much higher than they would have otherwise been. And I think Cricket Australia needs to get involved. They shouldn't just put this at arm's length and say, well, it's up to the BCCI to sell to the highest bidder. They should get involved and somehow find a way to, balance it off against other TV deals or whatever else. But if this had been on Gem or on Channel 7 Mate, perfect timing.
Or Paramount. Don't leave out Jalisa's network. What is it?
The football seasons had only, the NRL's only just started. The AFL's still a week or two away. It would have done. I think it would have rated the house down on those on the second networks of those two, of either of those two. I think it's a missed opportunity by Australia, and they should get it right for next time. It shouldn't just be that the only time that the Australian men's test team is on free to air when they're away from home is the Ashes.
I completely agree with you, and I am going to put it back on the networks as well. I know it's really expensive, but I think the money to have this test series would have on, and the time friendly, in particular the time zone friendly slot that it was in, I think would have reaped far more benefits than the summer that we just saw that was on free to air.
Yeah, and I think that it's often a truism, I think, of Australian cricket that we almost need to be the underdogs. That when we played the West Indies, the level of interest in the 80s and 90s was massive. And we sort of feel that way with this, playing against India now. And I've felt that there's been a lot more chat about this series, certainly amongst my friends and just the general vibe that I've got, than for a series in a while. And with the games on fast forward, as they have been, with the ball moving all over the shop. I heard it on SEN the other day. I was listening to Vossi and Brandy, and they were talking about it, and it was the same night as the league kicked off. And Greg Alexander was saying he actually had the league on one TV and the cricket on the other. And I thought, wow, I didn't expect to hear that. And that, I think, shows that it's how popular it is. And it could have done well on free-to-air.
Now, Jelisa, do you have a can't let it go? Anything that bugged you that Paul and I have said in recent episodes?
No, nothing that bugged me, but probably it actually ties in well with your last segment on domestic cricket, and it is a little bit New South Wales centric. But I just thought it was a good time to reflect on Trent Copeland, who
Very good.
he's retired
Really
from
good
the
call.
yeah. So and
But
he's
Trent Copeland,
obviously
he's been on this show a couple of times. He's the third leading wicket taker for New South Wales in Shield cricket. He's taken over 400 first-class wickets. What a great
This
career.
is a really good can't let it go, Manners. I'm enjoying this.
as Dennett said.
I was just giving some context for people listening.
That was pretty much what I was going to say. But so
Okay.
he is incredibly generous with his time at promoting cricket and coming on podcasts, and he's got his media work going, and we saw that he did a little bit in the Olympics too. So he's got plenty of things going on outside of cricket, but just also a good club man and just a good man in general.
Absolutely. I was actually talking to his mother last night. Trent's younger brother was playing in the Plan B Regional Bash men's finals. Actually scored some runs, looks a good player. But yeah, you can just see, actually, one thing I got from talking to her last night was how invested the families are in, your professional career. And, she was kind of sad that she won't be at Shield games anymore. So, yeah, I never really thought about that, what the journey that the family goes on, riding the ups and downs. Maybe because I'm so selfish or something. All right, now my two can't let it goes are, sorry to everyone in Delhi, but I don't want Australia to ever go there again and play another test match. Those pollution figures that came out were crazy, and they should not be asking visiting teams to come and play where the pollution is plus 400. They say that in Australia, if it was that, they wouldn't let you go outside your front door. So I understand the challenges for Delhi with the pollution, but I just don't think they should be hosting international cricket in those conditions, especially test matches.
Well, it sort of adds to the fact that one of the ends at this new stadium for the test match tomorrow is called the Adani end, after a coal mining company. Not great.
But for the health of the players, I mean, a lot of the journalists got sick. A lot of the players were irritated by being out in those conditions all day. I'm sure it's not good for the Indian players either. I mean,
no, I agree with you.
Yeah, and then finally, I've got two can't let it goes. Josh Inglis, my man, scored 138 in the Marsh Cup final for Western Australia. He was elevated to open the batting for the first time. And I just wonder if he's making a play for that opening spot in the 50 over World Cup final. He's going to India for the one-day series following the tests. He scored a lot of runs recently, Inglis. He is an absolute gun. We're in a situation where we had Adam Gilchrist and Brad Haddin at the same time, and I think we've got that at the moment. Carey or Inglis are both fantastic players.
I like him, and I think that that if he's in the best few batters in the side, I mean, I would be quite happy for him to be in the test side tomorrow. I think he'd do quite well over there in those conditions. It'd be good to see how he goes.
All right, so that's can't let it go. Now we've got some questions. Jelisa, do you want to stick around for the YouTube questions, or do you want to dive out because you've been so brave?
I haven't been kicked out yet, so I may as well stick around.
Great. All right. Subik Mukherjee, should T-Mac be the next Aussie captain? Who wants to take this one?
I've gone mad. Who's T-Mac?
Talia McGrath. Talia McGrath.
Oh.
God, an International Women's Day of all days.
Oh,
wow.
I know. I was thinking of going, wait, is he going Todd Merv? Like, I was trying to think of that.
I think so. I think she captained the Strikers, I think, in the WBBL. She's a fine player, so absolutely she could be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stephen Matlock. Sorry, Jelisa? You disagree?
Oh, I was just saying we're probably a little bit premature talking about the next captain yet, I would think, but I certainly think that she would be a contender.
Stephen Matlock, what are your thoughts of the choose your own pitch approach with apparently 3 pitches prepared? Well, I think we discussed that before.
Kind of talked about
not
that.
fans. Not fans.
I'm not as against, like, I'm not pro pitch doctoring, but I'm not as unhappy when it kind of favors the home side a little bit.
I'd like to put out there, I'm not pro pitch doctoring.
I think it keeps it interesting. I like a challenge.
Sharada M, what's your opinion on Australia playing Morris over Murphy? Pitch doesn't look like a raging turner. I think they'll shave the grass off. There were pictures that came out with the grass, but I think they'll take that off. And I heard Steve Smith in the press conference saying that it's been 37 degrees over there in Ahmedabad, and that the pitch is drying out a lot. So just because it maybe looked a little bit green 2 days before the match, I think by the time the test starts, it won't. And I wouldn't play Morris over Murphy. Probably Boland would be the one to come in.
Did you see what Steve Smith put on Twitter maybe an hour or two ago?
What was it? I'll get it up.
Oh, he was just clarifying, perhaps, Menas, you can get his tweet up there. I'm using my phone, but I can't. But he was just clarifying what had been written in he had been quoted in an article, and the quote was right, but it sounded like he was favouring quicks over. He sounded like he was favouring quicks over spinners, but he was just
So I heard those comments, and actually I wanted to talk about it. It's good you brought it up. Thank you. He said basically Alan Border and a few people came out after the first and second test and said, Australia should maybe play to their strengths and have 3 quicks and 1 spinner. And he said, he was asked this in the press conference, and he said he's flabbergasted that people would suggest that. He thinks it's mind-boggling, I think was the word he said, because if you look at the conditions, there's no way you would play 3 quicks, and the spinners have taken all the wickets. So, yeah, he wasn't referring to the selection for this match. He was talking about those comments from the media back home.
Yeah, that's what he clarified on Twitter. He was saying, of course, I'm talking about the past matches, and we'll look at this pitch as it's individually what it is.
I think regardless of who we play, and I agree, it's not going to be Morris. But if it was Morris or whether it's Boland, our tail is still such a worry. I hope that these last few days, Murphy and Kuhnemann in particular have been in the nets facing a million balls because that's a real concern for me that at the moment we're kind of almost 7 out, all out.
All right, question here from Alexei. Statement. Travis Head is the current ODI opener. I know he played, I think, against England in the most recent series, but I don't think they've settled on an opening pair for the 50-over World Cup, and there is no guarantees David Warne will make it.
Remember at the time saying those 3 one-dayers against England were the saddest 3 one-dayers ever. It's like, I've forgotten that even happened. Is it actually legal to talk about them? I'm not sure if it is.
Well, let's move on then. Martin Lawrence, to me, obviously. Does Justin Langer send you a Christmas card, Andrew? No, because I didn't play Test cricket, so he doesn't want to have anything to do with me. It's like,
that's the saddest thing.
You play, yeah.
No, Martin, to answer your question though, Menas is hoping.
Menas does send himself Christmas cards with Justin Langer's name on them just to get the thrill, but no, Justin Langer himself has never done it.
And it doesn't mean that he doesn't send Justin Langer cards.
I've just got this little journal. Will I start will today be the day I hear from Justin Langer?
Dear diary.
I said on the show, I ran into him in the Sydney Test in the toilets at the SCG and
ran into him or hunted him down?
You followed him in there. Why are you following me into the cubicle? Please. So I told him, I said he did a great job as coach, and we had a very brief chat. I wondered,
well, thrilling. What an insight.
I'm just saying, I managed to pass on to Langer what a good job he did.
And what did he say to you? We said, did he say
how many test runs have you scored, champ?
No, thanks, champ. Thanks, champ. Walked away. Punter, I'm coming.
Did he say, yeah, thanks, legend? I'm just gonna go take a whiz now, but
no, it was after he'd been to the toilet. Did you hear me say I couldn't take a leak next to Ricky Ponting, Jelisa? I seized up completely during the Sydney test.
I did. Did I? Am I glad I heard that? I am not.
Well, I just think once you get over 40 test hundreds, something happens when you're around them.
I thought you were going to start talking about your prostate. You say once you get over 40, something.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly where I thought that was going. Yes. Once you get over 40, and I was like, you know what? I'm tapping out. I'm done.
All right. Well, thank you for everybody who's watched live on YouTube. Jelisa, thank you so much for joining us on Cricket Unfiltered.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I think we've actually, I know you've been frustrated with StreamYard, the platform we use, but it's working. I think they've made enhancements. It's worked great on your phone. I'm still flabbergasted you don't have internet at home in 2023, but hey, at least we got there.
Do I even have a home? I mean, I'm in my car.
Yeah. This is where I sleep.
All right, off to bed, guys.
That is going to make a great video. Paul, always a pleasure. So we're going to be back tomorrow recording our daily reviews of the 4th test. So stay tuned to them. Stay tuned for them. They might be they'll be on YouTube actually, whether we use video or not. But they'll certainly be every night after the test. Hope it goes more than 3 days. Yeah, indeed.
Can't wait.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Do a few things. Rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. If you've got cricket loving friends, share this podcast with them. We're on TikTok at Cricket Unfiltered. We're on Twitter at Oz Cricket Pod. It will be changed eventually. And go and follow us there. I'm at Amenas on Twitter. Jelisa, where can the listeners connect with you?
At Jelisa Apps. There is only one.
Yes, there is. And Paul, where would you like the listeners to find you? On TikTok?
Yeah, on TikTok, I'm at paul.dennett, Dennett.
All right, well, that's it from the Cricket Unfiltered podcast for this week, but we'll be back for our daily reviews of the test match.